Welcome to my talk about deconstructing comics. This is Tim in Tokyo. I've been involved in producing Deconstructing Comics podcast for over 12 years now. Starting the podcast was actually not my idea, but fairly soon after it started, I became the one who's been keeping it going. The story starts in 2003. At that time, I was working at Yokota Air Base in western Tokyo, in the western Tokyo city of Fusa, for a civilian contractor. I had also just revived my comic that I hadn't touched since coming to Japan in 1989. The comic was The Crazing Spider Hag, a satirical comic that started from the premise of Aunt May being bitten by a radioactive spider and getting spider powers. I started it when I was in junior high, continued through high school, didn't work on it during college, but started it up again a while after college. I'd been inspired to resume it when I started the site globalcomics.net in 2001, which was intended to be a comprehensive comics site, but it wasn't. I put scans of my old work there, and in 2003 I started putting up new pages. But I wasn't happy with my drawing ability. At Yokota there's an arts and crafts center, and I had taken a photography class there. The center asks for suggestions of classes they could offer, so I put in a request for a comics drawing class. About a year later, in spring of 2004, they started one. I vaguely recall that they called me to tell me the class was going to happen. So I signed up. The teacher turned out to be Mulele, who had somehow been recruited from off base to teach the class. I was in the class for about a year, and Mulele helped me make my comic look a bit better, particularly in terms of the inking. See before and after here. If I had done this after the class, these guys in the foreground would have a much thicker ink on them, because they're, but this was all the lines are really thin in this old one. You can see the difference here, like a year or two later. The class, for much of the time, consisted of me and Brandon, a career military guy. Then one day, Mulele said to me and Brandon, "I've taught you everything I can. You've graduated." Then it became the three of us meeting up in a coffee shop on the base every week after Mulele taught his class to talk about comics. This is a few years later, but same three guys. We did that for a few months in 2005, and then Mulele said to me, "Let's start a podcast. It can be a way to promote your comic." As I said, it was 2005, and podcasting was considered the next big thing. I learned later that Wired magazine had run an article about podcasting earlier that year, and that was the catalyst for a lot of the shows that started in 2005. I had heard something about podcasting, but I wasn't listening to any shows and didn't know how to set up an RSS feed. But I looked into that, and just before the American holiday of Thanksgiving, the three of us recorded our first show, which was released on December 5th, 2005. You see, these are all of our self-portraits, although that's not actually Mulele. It's a character of Mulele's. Originally, it was called GCN Podcast because I was using the Global Comics Network site as a home for the podcast. The podcast became Deconstructing Comics with the second episode. Any similarity to the title of Scott McCloud's book, Understanding Comics, is probably not coincidental.